The palace had made it very clear that Her Majesty, Her late Majesty, was very keen that Andrew be given a job.
The Queen, and this is a key bit, is very keen that the Duke of York should take on a prominent role in the promotion of national interests.
Sir Humphrey, eat your heart out. The memo from the Mandarin at the helm of the Quango in charge of promoting overseas trade described the former Prince Andrew as a natural fit for the envoy role he held for a decade. The man himself seemed to rate his performance.
It's part of the whole process of trade promotion, trade development, and I am just one of a number of people who can actually do that, along with the Minister of Trade. And each of us has a unique set of tools that we can call upon.
What we now know, thanks to files prized out of the government, is the late Queen pressed for Andrew to be given the job, which he was then forced to relinquish when his friendship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein came to light. Just before he stepped down, the Queen's favourite son reckoned he was being pretty useful.
And I'm finding it very difficult now to be able to cope with the demand, which is lovely, but at the same time annoying, because I'd love to be able to help all of them, but I can't.
The vibe in today's files, though, is less noblesse oblige, more pampered prince, a man who had a taste for, quote, more sophisticated countries, a preference for ballet, not theatre, and a desire not to be burdened with regular meetings or paperwork. Me too, Andrew. It's beyond satire. Oh, wait.
2, 1... Oh, good heavens!
Marvellous, isn't it, sire?
It's very red.
Quite. Really brings out the colonial legacy in your eyes, sir.
Yes, satirist Munya Chihuahua is on hand to make sense of it all. He's played King Charles in a musical, so maybe he can get inside the head of a former prince who once roamed the world, but is now confined to a ramshackle cottage not far from a bog. Well, for years now, it's been suggested and reported that Queen Elizabeth had personally pushed for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor to be given a public role after he left the Royal Navy. Today, we got the proof, as previously secret files were released. Our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has been going through them all today. Sam, go on then, talk us through the bits that have caught your eye.
So let's look at the red flags, Cathy, in the Andrew Papers. What are the Andrew Papers? 31 pages released by government today. They were forced to do it by a vote by MPs. And it tells us quite a lot about how the appointment came about and just some of those things that might have rung alarm bells. Let's look at why it happened. What this is a document between a top official and one of the most senior figures in the palace. And it tells us, look at this, I'm going to enlarge the key bit here. There it is. As you were just saying, it's the Queen's wish that the Duke of Kent was succeeded in the role of envoy by the Duke of York. So there we have the confirmation of what you were just saying had been speculated for years, that the late Queen Elizabeth pushed this role. She thought it would fit well with the end of the Duke of York's active naval career, maybe worried a little bit that he didn't have enough to do. And now here's an interesting insight. The Queen is very keen that the Duke of York should take on a prominent role in the promotion of national interest. She wanted to raise the then Duke of York, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor's profile. That was the whole idea of this role. So the Queen was absolutely integral to all of that. But what do we learn from the various bits of documentation as part of this release file? Right, now this is another memo from 2000, height of the Blair years, between a Whitehall official and Buckingham Palace. And it describes meetings with particularly Captain Blair, who was Prince Andrew, as he then was, Principal Private Secretary, his top official. And it's talking through how the role might work. And it says things like the Duke himself likes travelling. And there's quite a lot of individual preferences being passed on from the palace to Whitehall as they're working out how he'll do the role. I asked what were the Duke's preferences for activity during his visits. And a line that will haunt for the ages, a preference for ballet rather than the theatre. And it also added, and I think this line will be scrutinised quite closely, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor tended to prefer the more sophisticated countries, particularly those in the lead on technology. So clearly some countries he wanted to go to, some he wanted to avoid. But here, I think, Cathy, is, for me, one of the big red flags. It begins, Captain Blair, so the top aide to Prince Andrew. Let me just go on to the next page. because this is absolutely key. Let me make it even bigger. The Duke should not be offered golfing functions abroad. This was a private activity, and if he took his clubs with him, he would not play in any public sense. Right, this is quite significant to me, because what it is one of the most senior palace officials just notifying that the Buckingham Palace is concerned of the potential for conflicts of interest, using these trips funded by the taxpayer that are meant to promote business, maybe for a bit of golf, and that the Duke of York, as he then was going to take his golf clubs with him. And they just wanted informal memos to make everybody clear that this was a bad idea because they thought it was a potential conflict of interest. As you say, there's a lot in here, I think, that people will pick over for a while. We've got another disclosure to come the other side of recess that takes us to the beginning of next month. I think for Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, all of this is just uncomfortable viewing.
Sam, great. Thanks very much for taking us through all of that. Well, former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and former Labour Minister Caroline Flint are on the sofa tonight. Caroline, the Queen wanted Andrew to take on, and I quote, a prominent role in the promotion of national interest. Was that an improper request, do you think?
I don't think it's right, actually, that should really have happened in that way. And the truth is, you know, what does a prominent role be in the national interest? I think it seems all wrong. And looking at the letters that Sam's just shared with us, it's absolutely flipping bizarre. I mean, what we were just saying, what's a sophisticated country? What's
we'll
a sophisticated
we'll
country,
get to that.
Kwasi?
We'll get to that.
You know,
yeah,
I'm not going to be drawn in on that.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about that. But
I disagree slightly. We've got a constitutional monarchy. The Queen did have huge experience. She obviously, you know, very much loved Andrew. People say he was a favoured son. And reading that correspondence, it suggests to me that she just wanted him to be kept busy.
Yeah, and wasn't it better that he was kept busy?
Yes, I mean, from her point of view,
paying his bills.
From her point of view, she knew exactly who he was. She loved him dearly, and she wanted him to be kept busy.
So can you make a value for money argument?
Well, of course, they didn't pay him a wage as such for this. But
a lot of expenses.
But a lot of expenses, and enlarging it, as we might say in my family.
But
he was larging it up, wasn't he, in terms of what he could get. Massages, the first-class travel,
ballet,
retinue and everything else. Oh, yes, ballet, not theatre. Sorry to theatre-goers out there. It's only the ballet. Maybe he liked the tutus or something. Let's not go into that. But, I mean, seriously, I mean, I think, you know, we know from informations that sort of come out since then, that a lot of the time he was having private meetings with business people while he was meant to be doing the trade envoy work, having sort of connecting sort of trips to elsewhere and doing other things outside of the official duty. And at the end of the day, the taxpayer was funding that.
But look, it's very easy to read history backwards. Now, knowing what we do rather, knowing about the Epstein connection, we can see all the problems. In the year 2000, he was someone who'd just come out of the Royal Navy, and there was, he was going to be paid by the taxpayer anyway. He's a member of the royal family. So
but people in the system knew about the problems, didn't they?
They may have been aware of them, but it's a purely legitimate thing, I think, to say, what can we do with him? How can we use him to further the British interests? And that was the calculation they made.
Let's come back to the point that Caroline raised about his preference for sophisticated countries. What do you think that means?
That's bizarre. I mean, it means whatever you want it to mean. I mean, it's
five-star hotels, six-star hotels.
Yeah, he didn't want to be in a tent in a very hot country with mosquitoes flying around. I mean, clearly there was a level of sophistication, luxury, whatever you might call it, that he wanted. And whoever wrote that phrase, I mean, it's a telling phrase. I've never heard it, but we can read into it what we want.
I think there's a real thing about some of these roles that get created. I mean, governments under the Conservative and Labour have these MPs who become trade envoys as well. And, without, disparaging any of them,
it's jobs for the boys and girls.
I understand about network, but sometimes it's jobs to keep them on side. It's jobs to keep them busy, as obviously the Queen there wasn't enough, obviously, at home to keep him busy. Let's send him off to do something else.
In our political system, the parliamentary system, there are often, if the government has a big majority, there are dozens of backbenchers who need to be kept busy. And Andrew was a kind of version of that. I mean, the
Council
old
of Europe's
phrase.
another one.
Well, the old phrase.
Jetting off the hot
well, the view. I mean, obviously they have to be MPs, but a lot of them, are in the House of Commons. They've got to have late votes.
Oh, it's so hard.
It's hard,
so
but they're milling around. And if you're running the government, you don't want these guys plotting and girls plotting, so you make them trade envoy to Tanzania or wherever it might be.
Well, do you think, just come back to the sophisticated countries point, I mean, is there something that's a little bit racist about that, really, to be fair?
I think you're over-interpreting it, but you can...
You said no mosquitoes.
Well, that's not
no
racist.
sitting in a tent. But that suggests a country that is not as developed as ours, so he didn't want to go to those countries where there's famine or whatever.
No, he wanted to have a nice lifestyle. He wasn't prepared to rough it, if I can use that phrase, and clearly sophisticated nations is a coded way of saying we want him in the developed world and in nice hotels.
Yeah, but, when you think about the Commonwealth and the monarchy's role in the Commonwealth, it's pretty offensive.
So if a courtier wrote that now, they would probably get old over the coals for writing that. This is 26 years ago. They were trying to express themselves in a sort of delicate, polite way.
Well, they were probably reflecting what they'd heard from Andrew himself.
Yeah, I mean that goes without saying. But he had a taste. We know who he is. I mean, he liked luxury. He didn't want paperwork. He wanted to, have a nice life.
He liked golf courses.
That wasn't allowed, though.
That was the official sort.
That wasn't allowed.
But the government hasn't ruled out removing him formally from the line of succession, but it hasn't happened yet. Do you want to see that hurried up?
Look, I think it is extremely doubtful that he will ever, given what's the family makeup in terms of, obviously, William, who has got 3 children, Harry, who has got 2 children.
But it's a symbolism
I mean, yeah, I suppose it's a symbolism, but I think having his titles removed from him in the way they've done, I think there's maybe more to come out. But, I mean, he has...
And he's living near a bog. In a ramshackle cottage.
Look, I mean, in terms of the line of succession, I mean, you've got to remember when for a long time before William was born, and we remember it, he was the next in line. If anything had happened to Charles, he would have been the king. He's now, I don't know, 8th or 9th. I don't think this is a huge issue, and it would just be another symbolic humiliation. And I think he's had enough. I think
he's been humiliated.
I think my view is that let him be.
Right.
And he's also got the judicial...
But I wouldn't go as far as that.
No, but he's also got a judicial issue as well.
Would I feel it's useful to use a lot of time of this in Parliament? No. But I don't think he should at all be let off the hook in terms of
He's not being let off the hook.
Done.
I'm just saying that there's a judicial process, which we don't know what the outcome of it will be, and he's got to face that particular music. There's no point over-egging the pudding and stripping him of more titles and the line of succession, which is very abstract. In the first place, very contingent. I mean, he's 8th or 9th in the line of succession.
Yeah, I mean, he's denied all wrongdoing as well. I should stress that here. Just one final thought. The Queen's wish is that was the phrase we saw in some of these files. It's hard to ignore that command, isn't it? Do you think that's changed at all in terms of the way in which the deference to royalty?
I think Queen Elizabeth II had a unique and never to be repeated role in terms of the national life. I mean, she'd been a monarch, even by 2000, she'd been there for nearly 50 years. She had huge authority. She was very, very well respected across the world. And it's very difficult for any successor to capture that charisma, that mystique she had. And the other thing with her is that she was the mother of a son that she cared deeply about. She cared about all her children. But I think people say, I think probably rightly, that he was particularly favoured. And she could see the risks that clung around him, and decided that it would be a good idea to keep him busy.
I think it's part of another. I think it's part of another era, and there was a human side to this about her judgments about her kids.
Sure.
But I think that era's over.
No, it's not going to.
Okay. Right. Well, this era of discussion is over for now. Rachel Reeves has been telling Sky News that she thinks she will deliver the next budget due in the autumn. Well, for that to happen, of course, Sir Keir Starmer's government will have to at least get through this summer. Well, as if by magic, today the Chancellor announced what she called her Great British Summer Scheme, which includes a temporary VAT cut on family days out. She sat down a bit earlier with our business correspondent Paul Kelso, who joins us now. So, Paul, tell us about the package she's announced.
Yeah, this is a bit of Treasury largesse. It's a bit of a summer giveaway. an attempt, doubtless well-meaning, to try and help families struggling with the cost of living. Think eat out to help out, but without the social distancing or the anxiety. It's a VAT cut on tickets for children, children's meals in restaurants, tourist attractions, free bus travel for under 15s to get there, as well as a package of other measures, some of which were quite unexpected, including about £500 million for the chemicals and ceramics industry. But the focus the Prime Minister and the Chancellor particularly wanted to give today was on this attempt to give a little bit of help as summer comes, perhaps because they know the autumn, not just for them, but for the economy, could be much more bleak. And I spoke to the Chancellor about the plans, and particularly whether she would be around to deliver the budget that she's promised to set out more detail on all of this. Do you think you'll be delivering the next budget?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because in the almost 2 years I've been Chancellor, I've got the economy growing, beating the forecasts. We're the fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first quarter of this year, defying the forecasts. Inflation, just yesterday, the numbers came out that inflation is down. The only G7 country where inflation fell last month, beating the forecasts. And we're tackling the cost of living. We've done that with £150 off energy bills. We've done that by freezing rail fares and prescription charges. And I've done it again today with this package of measures to help businesses, to help motorists, to help with the supermarket stock, and to help with the cost of the summer holidays.
And I'm sure all the people who want to be Prime Minister hear that loud and clear. To be clear, do you back the current Prime Minister to continue in his job?
The Prime Minister is getting on with his job in being Prime Minister, and there is no vacancy.
Do you back him to continue?
Look, let's see what happens in the future, but Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister. He has chosen me to be his Chancellor, and I'm getting on with my job, delivering for the country and delivering for our Prime Minister on his priorities, which are growing the economy, tackling the cost of living crisis, getting immigration down and reducing NHS waiting lists, all of which we are achieving and succeeding in doing.
You've said nothing today about energy costs. You've talked about the need to do something in future, but one of the reasons you said nothing is because, as I understand it, you don't believe that a huge borrowing spree, as happened last time with the energy price guarantee, works. Do you think the people who want to be, Andy Burnham in particular, understand that the UK is maxed out and that the public finances will not withstand the kind of policies he has in mind?
Well, Andy has been really clear that he would stick to the fiscal rules that Labour Party set out in our manifesto and that I've delivered in government. And those fiscal rules say that we pay for day-to-day spending through tax receipts, but that we can, subject to getting debt down, invest in those things that will help grow our economy. And Andy, like Keir Starmer, like me, are absolutely committed to those things. But if you look at the package of measures that I've set out today, they are affordable because we're closing a tax loophole. The foreign branch exemption, which means that multinational companies can book losses overseas in the UK and therefore reduce their corporation tax here. That's not right, it's not fair. Businesses should pay their fair share of tax, and we're using the revenues from that to help people with the cost of living.
If I may, one more personal question. Yesterday you were heckled quite aggressively at a petrol station. You clearly didn't think much of the bloke's manners, and many people will agree with you that is no way to do that. But the kind of anger that was there, does it surprise you? Do you understand it? And I wonder if you think you've got any chance of changing someone like that.
I'm not sure if I can change his mind. I think his mind was pretty made up, Paul. But I think the majority of people in this country recognise that the Labour government had a tough job when we came in. Public finances were in a mess, public services were in a mess, and the economy wasn't growing and living standards weren't increasing. We are turning those things around. Can't do it all overnight, but I think people recognise that we are beginning to turn things around. And what I would just say to that gentleman, he says that he loves this country and that he's a patriot. Well, one of the things that I love about this country is good manners, and I think that he lacked those yesterday.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Well, Paul, does she really back the Prime Minister?
It's quite interesting, isn't it? She was clearly unhesitating that she thinks she'll deliver the next budget. We can ask questions about that. I then pressed her on whether she supports the Prime Minister. It's an obvious question to ask. We haven't had an opportunity to speak to her since the leadership race exploded within the Labour Party. And it needed a couple of goes, didn't it, to try and get it. Her first answer was that he was doing the job and there wasn't a vacancy. And then it sounded a little short of unequivocal. She said he was the Prime Minister, she's delivering for him. And clearly, wanted to sound like she was in lockstep. Should be said that subsequent to the interview, and it was a broadcast round, she's done other interviews with other broadcasters today. I got a call from the Treasury to be clear that she absolutely does support the Prime Minister. So whether that was an error in her language or whether she's leaving her options open. I mean, I did detect in there something of a pitch when I asked her about continuing as Chancellor. She thinks she's got a record that she can defend in the recent economic data around growth and the likes of it. And she was not critical in any way when offered the opportunity to criticise Andy Burnham and some of his comments in the past about bond markets. So plainly, her future is in question. I think she enjoys being Chancellor. She would love to continue. Big question is whether she'll get the chance.
This is the Treasury. It's a pretty grim building, really, and some pretty grim figures have come out of it recently. But today, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, emerged into the sunshine. And just across the road, there's people enjoying the sun and the prospect of a sunny bank holiday weekend. When does that ever happen? So her message today was full of sunny optimism. VAT cuts for family days out. Question is, will it make any difference? Will people feel it? Will they feel the love this summer? And I suppose when I'm thinking about this and what she's set out today, it's forestalling some really pretty terrible economic times ahead because of the Iran war. The autumn is looking quite grim again. So I guess the message today was enjoy it while you can. Kwasi and Caroline are on the sofa. We should have actually taken the sofa outside. It's so lovely out there.
Very nice.
But Kwasi, you know that building well. And
I know the building. Sort of I've been asked that question.
Yeah.
So there is no Chancellor of the Exchequer in the world, Finance Minister, when asked, will you be in your job in 3 weeks' time, or whenever the time frame might be, that's going to not say, absolutely. I was, in fact, asked that very question the day before I was sacked. And I said, without any hesitation, because as soon as you start putting doubt into that, then that becomes the story.
React.
So there's no way...
Well, also the markets would react,
everyone will react. And so there was no way... And I saw the question, I thought, she's obviously going to say yes. The answer that did surprise me was the second question, which was, are you backing the Prime Minister? Now, that's a pretty easy question. And you can say, I am absolutely behind him 100%. He's done a great job. She could have said that.
And she didn't.
She didn't.
Caroline, that's it. It's what psychologists call a tell, wasn't it?
I think so. I have to agree with Kwasi on that. I mean, the truth is until we have the outcome of the Makerfield by-election, none of us really know what's going to transpire out of that, depending the way that goes. And, you know, a lot of people's expectations may be thwarted. It may be Andy's thwarted, it may be Wes's thwarted, it may be the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, but it also might mean other members of the Cabinet as well. So we are, I think, you know, it is a difficult time, but I have to say, you know, one of the things that, regardless of what's going on in the background of by-elections, the government's got to carry on doing the job. And I think this week, actually, the government have come out fighting, actually. Her announcements today about, you know, the different things recognising the costs on families, particularly in the school holidays. I know some people will, you know, poo-poo that, say that's rubbish and all this thing. But do you know what? I actually sort of think, you know, every little bit helps. If you've got kids, and already they've capped earlier this year the fares for buses to £3. But if you've got a group of kids and you want to take them somewhere, or if you're a teenager, you know, 13, 14, and you want to go down the swimming pool, and that's one thing that you don't have to pay, it all helps.
But it may do, but it was the impression one got was that it was just a scattergun approach, so they're going to cut the imports on chocolate.
Well, they haven't got enough money for the big guns.
No, but that was the impression. And actually what happened yesterday was there was this suggestion that they were going to have a price capping policy, like an incomes and pay.
The supermarkets.
And the supermarkets went
they were trying to get the supermarkets
and then they retreated.
But I think they've been quite creative. I actually think they've been quite creative, actually, in thinking about where can they do things as government. So they can actually cut those import tariffs. They can reduce VAT. They can do other things.
It might be a summer of love, you know, that's the sort of impression she created. And it was such gorgeous weather today, wasn't it? But, you know, it's going to be an autumn of discontent.
But really...
sorry, forgive me. I mean, what you said is absolutely right. They're on the front foot. They're trying to fight. They're showing that they're doing things. So that begs the question, why didn't she back the Prime Minister? Why didn't she say, we're doing all these things?
Moving on from that,
the Prime Minister is doing a great job.
But on the
is it going to be an autumn of discontent?
Well, look, on the autumn thing, I actually completely understand why they're not getting into now targeted interventions in terms of energy bills, because the focus has been mainly on fuel, what people actually pay for at the pump. And they've done a considerable amount of work around that. We've heard some more stuff this week around road tax for hauliers, supporting the farmers with red diesels and so forth. The price cap that we're currently in is actually lower because they made a decision to reduce that and take some of the costs on bill payers back onto general taxation. Right. And it is, I think it's something like £208 lower than this time last year. The other thing is, of course, we've got the next price cap will be announced for the 1st of July. And people are saying it will be higher because we might get an effect from other things.
And the effect of the Iran war means that the autumn is bound to be pretty terrible.
But that's why I think it's important that they use this time to actually, and they've been talking about this for months. I've actually been in meetings where this has been talked about as well. They've been working out what they could do from the autumn that I don't think will be repeat, and I wouldn't support a repeat of giving everybody £400, but a targeted support, because actually it's in the winter when you have to start turning up the heating.
Just to answer my point, do you accept that there will be, you know, pretty ropey economic news to come, that it feels a bit better now? You know, there's talking about the fastest growing country in the G7. That's not going to last? Or am I being Debbie Downer?
Well, I don't know. I mean, people have really talked down them when we were looking at recently, when they didn't make a decision on the interest rates of the Bank of England. They sort of kept them steady. And now we see in the first quarter, actually, there was growth of 0.6%. If you actually, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if you took that over the course of a year, if that was to happen, we're talking about the sort of the growth rates that we saw under Tony Blair. But even so, you can't have it both ways. You can't, on the one time, when we get some stats that aren't so great, like they didn't cut the interest rate and say, oh, it's terrible. We can see now that the growth for the first part of the year, when everybody thought it wouldn't be a rise, has gone up. Unemployment's gone down. Actually, inflation's gone down to 2.8. And there's some signs there that things are better than they were last year. So my view of the growth figures, they were good, relatively good figures. I think there's a lot of activity ahead of when the tax implications, the tax impact of the budget. So the budgetary measures will kick in April, and I think there was lots of activity in the first quarter ahead, anticipating the changes. That's what I think. And actually, most of the commentators, most of the city forecasts are suggesting we're not going to get an annualised, we're not going to get 4 times 0.6 or whatever, 2.5%. We're not going to get anywhere near that. And as you say, I think there are headwinds. The problem that the government have, and it's a political problem, because, and I think the itsy-bitsy way that they're approaching this points to the deeper issues, that they don't have a narrative, really. And that's one of the fundamental problems that they're having with Keir Starmer. We haven't mentioned, I'm sure you have in a previous programme, but Wes Streeting's speech this week. If you look at what Wes said and saw what he said, it's completely different from this rosy kind of, you know, everything's going brilliantly. He made some very fundamental, devastating points about the lack of direction and the existential threat for the Labour Party. And none of this stuff, in terms of, you know, cutting import taxes on chocolate or whatever it might be, will have any impact.
Not cutting through. More to come in just a second. But here on your screen is a list of the candidates who've declared so far in the Makerfield by-election.
We're on the hunt for crypto billionaire Christopher Harble.
But here in Koh Samui in Thailand, where he lives and has business interests, he goes by the name of Charpreet Sakunkut.
Now, he's a crypto billionaire who was named just this week in the list of the UK's wealthiest people for the first time. But even before that, Christopher Harborne had hit the headlines after it emerged the Thai-based businessman gave Reform UK leader Nigel Farage a £5 million gift. Sky News has tracked the billionaire to the island of Koh Samui, where our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch spoke to people who live there to try and get a sense of the man.
To find Britain's elusive and biggest political donor, we've come to the pristine shores of Southeast Asia. We're on the hunt for crypto billionaire Christopher Harborne.
But here in Koh Samui in Thailand, where he lives and has business interests, he goes by the name of Chakrit Sakunkrit.
He's bankrolling Reform UK and gave a £5 million gift to Nigel Farage in 2024. That's now being investigated by the UK Parliament's watchdog. But here, Mr. Harborne is all about wellness.
One of the things that we try to help all of our guests that come along is change one thing on each visit.
That's him talking here, the 5-star Kamalaya Hotel he owns and sometimes stays in. Dr. Narantorn Sirasintorn took part in a talk with him in 2024.
I see many billionaires, but he is very nice. He is quite humble, and he is quite open.
Did he talk to you about himself, about living in Thailand and his business?
We don't go deep in that part, but what can I feel that he dedicated and he tried to support Thai business, Thai opportunity. Like in Thailand, we are the wellness hub. And what he built in Kamalaya, I think is one of the most, it's called global wellness destinations.
He splits his time between here and Bangkok, and while he's given the largest ever single donation by a living person to a British political party, here he's known for far smaller, charitable donations.
One of the small bits of information we have been able to pick up is that his luxury resort donates money to local school children if they've done well in their exams, and this is one of those schools, and we're about to meet one of the children that have received money from him.
Alice is 9 years old. She was given 100,000 baht as a reward for her results, more than £2,200.
รู้สึกดีค่ะที่ได้รับทุนการศึกษาแล้วก็ดีใจมากๆเลยค่ะที่ได้ไปซื้อรถให้พวกพี่ค่ะรถพี่พังแล้วต้องซื้อใหม่ให้ค่ะไม่มีรถมาส่งหนูไปโรงเรียน
We did, of course, ask for an interview with Christopher Harborne. We haven't heard back yet from his team on that, but what they did tell us is that he's not actually in Thailand right now. He's abroad, clearly keeping a very low profile. The impression you're left with after a few days here is that this is a man not just hyper-focused on politics, but laser-focused on extending life too, even if he's giving very little away about his own.
Cordelia Lynch reporting there. Kwasi, you move in this crypto world. You chair a crypto company. Do you know Christopher Harborne?
I met him. I had lunch with him many years ago. And the way he made his money was he was an early adopter of digital assets. I mean, he was into a coin called Ethereum and Bitcoin 12, 13 years ago. And that's really been the basis of his huge increase in wealth. The House of Commons is looking at the donation. I don't know the details about that, but they're doing the right thing.
Do you think it should have been declared, though, by Nigel Farage?
I don't know when it was made. So if it was made before he was an MP, then that's a different issue. If it was made while he was after he was elected, he should have declared.
So the rules say 12 months before. If it's a donation, he says it was a gift.
Yeah, so those are the rules. But in terms of donation, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Stuart Wheeler gave the Tories £5 million. Now, that was all, he gave it to the party, and that was all declared, and it was then hailed as the biggest ever donation
So you think nothing to see here?
Well, look, the House of Commons is adopting a procedure, and we'll have to just see what the committee says.
Right. OK. Well, now, the guidelines have been published on how equality law is going to be applied to single-sex spaces. Last year, the Supreme Court ruled that gender refers to biological sex, and now the government has set out when transgender people can be excluded from men-only and women-only spaces, such as toilets and in sport. Our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, has more for us. Ali.
Hi, Cathy. Yes, here you go. This is it. It is about 300 pages long, and it is long awaited. It includes guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission on a range of things, but most importantly, single-sex spaces, as you say, after that landmark ruling from the Supreme Court, which was a huge moment because it was the moment when the Supreme Court decided that gender, that biological sex was how you would define what a woman was. That was a key moment. And this is the key bit from that guidance. It says a trans man might be excluded from the women-only service if the service provider decides that because he presents as a man, other service users could reasonably object to his presence and exclude. I think we have a graphic we can show you, and excluding him is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. So effectively, that is it. It is saying trans people would be excluded, and we heard from the chair of the EHRC who said that we need to think about the impact that might have on transgender people. There could be a third space, for example, where they could go. But an interesting bit here is the impact assessment that came with this, and I think we can all show you that, which shows some ways in which the impact on people from the transgender community might be hard to avoid. They talk about double exclusion, possible that they could be barred from both spaces, alternative provision because of the lack of funding or space to offer a third space could be difficult. Involuntary disclosure. New guidance explains how service providers can request information about an individual's sex at birth. This may force trans people to out themselves in public or professional settings. So that is the impact assessment. This is the guidance, and the number 10 spokesperson saying that this will provide the clarity, and that is what so many organisations wanted after that Supreme Court ruling.
Ali, thanks very much. Kwasi and Caroline are on the sofa still. Caroline, it took Bridget Phillipson a long time to come up with this guidance. Explain why.
I don't know why it took 13 months to do this. I'm sure that she wanted to make sure it was thorough, and I have to say it is an important piece of guidance today because it's going to affect a lot of organisations, and it's really important that it is understood. So I am pleased that we finally have this because I think it has basically reaffirmed the Supreme Court ruling. But it also at the same time is not about negating supporting trans men and women and their rights as well under the Equality Act. And therefore, this is not... We've had this thing so long now, pitted against sort of biological women against trans women. This isn't what it's about. It's about recognising the differences of your biological sex and the protections you have under the Equality Act, but that doesn't mean that those who are trans shouldn't be protected in different ways as well. I would never, never support people discriminating or abusing trans people because they are trans, in the same way I don't accept misogyny against women. But
there was a bit of cynicism that, Bridget Phillipson, could see that she was going to offend various people in the party if she came down on one side or the other.
I think our party's been on a journey because I would have to say
it's not that long since
to be honest,
and
let's be clear about this. This really all started with Maria Milner, who was chair of the Women Inequalities Committee. There were Labour, Liberal, Democrat, I think, and Conservative members of that committee who produced a report which, when it came to it, there had been little discussion really more widely with biological women. And there was a consequence of that conversation was shut down. There are a number of politicians across all parties whose views have changed. We're streeting Bridget Phillipson, but also amongst the Conservatives as well. And I think we're Keir Starmer as well.
Do you accept that this is across party, people sort of drunk the Kool-Aid for a while?
I think there was a bit of that. I accept that. And I remember Dame Maria Milner when she was chair of that committee. Having said that, as far as the government is concerned, the Supreme Court were very clear more than a year ago about what the determination, the ruling if you like, that they came down with. And for the government to wait 13 months before they've actually said anything about it definitively, I think is extraordinary. And I think what you said
under the Conservative government
no, but we didn't have a
nothing about it.
but that's all well
But
and good.
could have
But they
sought a-
didn't
they could
have
have
the
sought a
Supreme
ruling.
Court. You know,
They could have sought a ruling
you'd gone
at
to the
any
Supreme
time.
Court. They had pronounced, and it took you 13 months to say that actually we agree with them. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the Labour Party, the left generally, if I can say that, is very, very split on this issue.
Well,
and
I
I
mean, Caroline's point was that you all
I'm
are.
sorry,
No, but the government...
I
but
actually,
the question-
I
the
actually
question-
think within the Tory ranks, and particularly amongst some Tory women MPs, you were looking for an equality issue in which you could own, and that's why
you could do the whole
in the way
plague
it did.
on both your houses. But we have a government, it's a Labour government, we had a Supreme Court last year, they said what the ruling was, and all it needed for the government to do was to say, we endorse this, this is right. But they didn't, because of the different factions,
because it's not
of the left, the Greens,
it's because
all of those
the
guys.
Supreme Court doesn't produce the guidance that's going to inform all those organisations out there in both the public and private sector about what they should do,
were very
but particularly
clear.
those ones in the public sector.
The court was clear, and it took the government 13 months to say what Bridget Phillips
I'm
said
going to have to
yesterday.
break up this little fight because we have something very different to discuss right now. Pause there. Well, of all the ways you could describe Donald Trump, showman is one that few could disagree with. Trump is a showman, plain and simple, but just how much is show and how much is a real man? Well, a new documentary is looking into whether Donald Trump has crafted a political persona that's simply a character from one of his lifelong loves, professional wrestling. Go with me on this. For years before the White House, Donald Trump was a regular on world wrestling entertainment shows, the brash, rough-and-tumble world of strongmen, nicknames, good guys and bad guys, including in this Battle of the Billionaires with former company boss Vince McMahon, where the winner got to shave the head of the loser. Obviously, while running for office, he's kept wrestlers and wrestling close. During the 2024 presidential campaign, Hulk Hogan rallied Trumpaholics at Madison Square Garden, and Hulk tore his shirt off at the Republican National Convention. And wrestlers now feature in his current administration. The lady in the white is Linda McMahon, the ex-wife of Vince. She's now the US Education Secretary, while the rather large bald man with a beard on the other side is Triple H, a former wrestler and now a member of the President's Council on Sports, Fitness and Nutrition. And all of this is the subject of the new documentary by comedian Munya Chawawa called Wrestling with Trump. Let's take a look.
We're going to America because there's a connection between Trump and wrestling. What do you think of the theory that pro wrestling might have influenced Trump?
Everything he does is the psychology of pro wrestling.
He's applied WWE storylines to politics.
Saying the things that gets the crowd to boo, then giving them what they want.
You know right away who the bad guys are. He makes it easy for you to feel that.
Sucks. Don't zoom in on that. Don't zoom in on that.
What's Trump gonna do?
Save America.
Well, Munya Chawawa joins me now to talk about all of that and much more. And actually, Munya, I'm actually going to start with the Royals because you have spent a lot of your career lampooning the Royals. So we're going to go back to our top story for just a moment. Because every day there's a new opportunity for parody, isn't there?
I mean, it's worrying in some ways because, you know, our fodder as satirists is often the bad news. And so the more there is, the busier we are.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I think in a very confusing infodemic, which we find ourselves in, you know, comedy and satire is a great conduit for conversation. And I think even between politicians and the electorate, it's good to have open communication channels. So there's a flip side to both sides of the coin when it comes to the news cycle.
And I mean, you played King Charles in Andrew the Musical.
I did. And you got the picture of the terribly laid wig, because that's a career ender right there.
I'll see if we can find that. But I just wondered what you thought about today's news of the late Queen pressing for Charles's brother, Andrew, to get this trade role. What did you think when you heard about the documents? And, you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, he didn't like sophisticated countries and things like that. He liked sophisticated countries,
For me personally, you know, I have a bit of Nepo baby fatigue at this point. You know, I've made so many sketches about this and nothing seems to move the dial on the conversation. And a lot of my peers and my friends feel that way. I honestly think at this point, if it's not moving the needle on the price of someone's food shop, there's a real frustration as to why we're still talking about it. I wrote a piece, you know, usually I do comedy videos, but I did write a piece earlier in the year which was
It was a Substack.
It was a Substack, and it was called God Save Our Girls. And it was about why this hasn't created similar outrage in people. You know, that a story like this is at the surface. Why aren't we marching outside of Buckingham Palace, and what can we ascertain from that?
And the double standard that people were marching outside asylum hotels and not marching outside Buckingham Palace when
Absolutely.
Andrew was arrested.
And that you could encapsulate in a device which we'll come to in wrestling, which is the foreign heel device, which is often to increase the popularity of the good guy, in quotation marks, you create a foreign villain that is everything that people fear. You know, it plays into their worst sort of natural impulses and stereotypes. That happens a lot in wrestling. You have had villains such as the Iron Sheik.
And that's what the heel is,
That's what the heel is.
Yeah.
Heel's a bad guy. Foreign heel is when wrestling used to create these big characters like the Iron Sheik, who was an Iranian-American, or someone we meet in the documentary who was an Italian-American but played the character of Muhammad Hassan post 9/11 in America. And, you know, that they published a storyline on the day of the 7/7 bombings, and that was the end of that wrestler's career. He was being used as a mouthpiece to speak about the Iraq War and people's feelings on terrorism, but he was an Italian-American. So for me, that kind of foreign heel arc plays into the conversation we're having now.
Well, you've made that segue beautifully.
Thank
You've
you.
knitted together all the elements
If you need a
in the
co-host,
show.
I'm down.
Great,
I'll battle Kwasi right now for a tables match. We've got the equipment laid out.
You're occupying the sofa very elegantly. Well, let's talk about your documentary, Wrestling with Trump. Just explain, because I've got to say, my producer earlier was trying to explain the link. For people who aren't familiar, what is the link between Trump and the wrestling world? It just kind of blows my mind.
I know it sounds absolutely crazy to think like these oiled-up, budgie, smuggler-wearing wrestlers could have formed the blueprint for a world leader, but there's actually proof. You know, it's an actual hypothesis that seems to show promising signs. Trump has always loved wrestling. He hosted WrestleManias in his venues. He took part in a WrestleMania, which a lot of people don't know. Watch it on YouTube. And if you watch the way that he operates, so many of the tentpoles of wrestling that you use to create stories, the smack talk, the foreign heel, the kayfabe, can be seen directly.
Stop there. Just explain kayfabe to me.
Kayfabe is this idea of...
I learned about this for the first time this afternoon, but I want you to explain it because I want to hear it from you.
EastEnders with body slams. Think of it like this. Wrestling is often described as soap opera for men. And that's because so much of wrestling hangs on the storytelling. And what the WWE was really good at doing is making you...
That's the World Wrestling Entertainment thing,
Absolutely, yes. Wrestling has always been really good at making you question reality. Sometimes wrestlers were thrown off cages and apparently buried alive in some matches, set on fire, and you'd never know if it was real. And so the parallel we draw with Trump is so many of the things he says. This war will last 2 weeks. I'll solve the Ukraine war in 24 hours. And then sort of pushing him on that, and his defenders saying, well, of course he didn't mean it. That is kayfabe.
So it's the blurring of truth and
reality for the purpose of entertainment, but also as a sort of shield and a Kevlar for the person doing it, because you can never actually falsify them or judge them by an objective metric, because kayfabe is pantomime.
And, you know, you're a wrestling superfan yourself, and I hear that wrestling is undergoing a sort of bit of a renaissance. Why do you think that is in these times, particularly?
Well, wrestling is actually a lot cleaner than it used to be because it's become more commercial. But that's why the footage and the storylines we allude to in the documentary are of an era where controversy was king. This was where Vince McMahon was all about smashing the emotion button in his entertainment. It was about really working people up and playing into their most primal, venomous instinct, because that's what got the ratings. And when ratings fell, he himself became a heel. And some of the storylines he was involved in incest, you know, being blown up in a limo, terrible things. But as Triple H says in one documentary, he was a superstar. He was like, well, who's worse, the people who did it or the people who enjoyed it? Because for fans, it was fantastic viewing. But now, as we conclude in the documentary, it's crazy to think that some of the heroes and villains I grew up watching might have created some in real life.
Yeah, I want to bring our politicians in just at this point, because I want to talk about British politics through this prism that you've set out. First of all, I mean, Caroline, I've got to ask, are you a wrestling fan?
Well, actually, when I was a kid, it's a world away from what this is, but it was Mick McManus, Jack Pallow, Giant Haystacks,
yeah,
you know,
I heard
Big Daddy and all this sort of thing. So, and in our household, because we did the pools, there used to be between the football earlier on the day on World of Sport and the actual results coming, and they used to have the wrestling on. So we used to sort of have it there and watch it. And I have to say, I used to like the tag wrestling.
Right.
I really loved the tag wrestling. That was very exciting. But I mean, you know, it was like there was the housewife's choice of who they liked as their favourite wrestler and all that. And it was really popular. I knew we were talking about this tonight, and I just had a check on it. At one point, there was 12 million people in this country watching that on Saturdays, so it was massive.
Yeah. We did
and
have
then it
only
went out
3
of fashion,
channels,
and they dropped it from the schedules.
Younger viewers, we only had 3 or 4 channels.
Kwasi, are you a wrestler?
No, I mean, I remember
You've got
those days,
physique for it, though.
I never did it. Okay, let's just kill that.
In fact, Munya, I wonder, you seem a bit wiry to be a wrestler.
What? Wiry?
Wiry.
No. Oh,
sorry, I didn't mean to insult you.
No, it's cool. I have what's called a sleeper build, which basically means my clothes are deceptively baggy, but underneath is 12 tons of British steel.
But also, isn't it that, I mean, in American schools, and in fact, funny enough, I was watching a Scandi Noir thing the other night, and one scene of it was in a Danish school, and the kids in the school were doing wrestling, but that's a big thing, isn't it, in some countries still, outside of the glamour and the glitz of what you're portraying.
The point that you made about Trump, I think, is really important, because he's an entertainer. I mean, if you look at where he built a lot of his reputation or his fame, was in The Apprentice, which was pure, you know, it was a kind of low-level soap opera. It wasn't really even that sophisticated. But he's always been in entertainment. I mean, in the 80s, he was a big fan of people like Mike Tyson. He was very close to that boxing promoter, Don King. Right. He was always in that. And it is
that hype though that's created out of it as well, and creating this sort of like these stories. I think it's interesting you talking about those stories, but also coming out with really grandiose statement and not worrying if it's not quite true.
Yeah.
We'll have another story in a week's time or something like that.
And I just want to bring in the idea of Nigel Farage here and where TikTok fits into all of this, because, you know, it seems to me that the populists are better at using social media than the sort of mainstream politicians. I actually just want to play we've got a little montage of some of the kind of mainstream parties trying to get in on the act on TikTok. Let's just have a look.
So, we are taking on the Labour Party in their heartlands, in the Midlands, the North West, the North East, and in particular South Wales and parts of Scotland.
Just come from the House of Commons chamber, where the Prime Minister introduced the government's legislative programme for the coming session. That is, assuming he stays in office long enough to deliver it.
Hi TikTok, I want you to be the first to know that this summer, for kids aged between 5 and 15, there's going to be free bus travel in England.
I mean, you are a king.
Sleep paralysis demon. Politicians doing TikToks. But look, I will speak
to it.
But
you're a king of TikTok. So what are they doing wrong and what are they doing right there?
I'll speak to it. So, OK, populists and I think populism does very well on a platform like TikTok. That's something we should remember because it's catered to short form. That means if you go into the app and you say, I can solve the immigration like this, I can make you rich this way, I can solve the economy this way. Perfect. You package it up, you put it out in 25 seconds, you've got your viral video. As we know, these real political issues require nuance, and often they take time, especially in regards to the economy. We are in this terrible doom loop, which I actually would argue any politician who is going to take the role of Prime Minister is going to have a long slog to deal with. So anyone masquerading as saying they can solve it in 3 simple steps on TikTok, you know, come with me to solve the UK economy. It's a farce. It's fallacious. So I would say that the populism just works well with the algorithm of TikTok, which is being brash, being loud, and saying it in the shortest way possible.
So should Rachel Reeves and, you know, Chris Philp, who we saw there, should they just sort of give up on TikTok? How do they do it? How do they crack it?
I think it's good to have a little bit of aura and charisma as a politician. If that's your gateway into doing the job, fine. But it's once you're in that position of power, making the real changes, I think. And I know that sounds like a really sort of broad-stroke political statement, but for me, what that means is we have a real problem with wealth distribution, I feel like, and wealth inequality in this country.
Well,
go on.
No, sorry, no, you finish.
OK, and I was going to say that I don't think we really got into tackling that. You know, when people talk about new leaders, we always talk about, well, they'll be put into a fiscal straitjacket. Even if Burnham gets in, it'll be a fiscal straitjacket. There's not going to be much you can change. Why not? You know,
well, pick you up on that wealth tax point, because I know you're not politically affiliated, unless you want to tell me something, you know, but Wes Streeting has just said he wants a wealth tax.
Yeah.
Are you a Wes man?
Well, I'm not a Wes man, but I'm a wealth tax man. I'm definitely for the idea of if there are people with enough money that even across 1,000 generations they can never spend it, that makes no sense to me. And why is it the case that whenever there's a new leader and people raise the idea of a wealth tax, it's always, no, it's too difficult, it's impractical, people will move.
But I disagree with you. I mean, I don't agree with that, but people are talking about wealth tax. And people like Zach Polanski is talking about a wealth tax. Neil Kinnock, who was leader of the Labour Party last summer, was talking about a wealth tax. Wes, who hopes to be the leader of the Labour Party, is talking about this. It's not beyond the bounds of political debate.
But I'm in the comment section of those people. I'm in the comment sections, and so for Zach Polanski, Guy's Economics, people are turning against those people and saying, you've lost your mind, it's not practical.
But they don't agree with the policy.
But I think the thing is that people use the term wealth tax, and there's about 50 different versions of it.
Do you know what? I think we're going to have to get you all back to discuss the wealth tax. I would love to do that.
We're going to have a brawl in the corridor after this, me and Kwasi.
You know what?
We're not going to wrestle.
We had a little end cap there on a robot. We dropped it so you can have 20 seconds to just tell me whether you're backing... Sounds like to me like you're backing Zach Polanski, maybe. Maybe you're a Green Party. You've got a green jacket on.
I've got a green jacket on and an invisible T-shirt. Look, I'm interested to see what... you want me to answer in 10 seconds? Yes. I'm interested to see what Burnham can do, but political stability is good, so if Keir stays, fine.
Got to go now, but wrestling with Trump...
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?